Hello, I'm Barbara Lee Diamonstein. Welcome to Inside Fashion. Today we'll be talking to Mary McFadden. The clothes, jewelry, and furnishings designed by Mary McFadden are often described in terms that are used to talk about art. Her work is derived from many sources, including cultures far and near, familiar and ancient. The result? Designs that are contemporary and timeless. It's a real pleasure to welcome you today, Mary. Actually, I have often thought of you as your own very best spokesperson, the very model of style and grooming. Would you give those of us with more taste than funds some tips on developing a personal style?
Right, I think American women don't find their sense of style for a long time, as opposed to a European woman who seems to have an innate flair. For finding her style. Maybe she spends more time in front of the mirror. I haven't figured that out yet. But at any rate, I do think it's very important to understand what you are inside yourself and then learn to project the fantasy of what you think you are to the public.
What is that mysterious quality that we know as good taste? How would you define that?
I really have never figured out what it is, but I do know what bad taste is. It seems not harmonious to me. A Ming Dynasty piece of jade, the shape, say an astrological disc. It took maybe 100 years to refine that shape, but now it's in perfect balance, and I consider that a form of perfect taste.
Your respect for the work of craftspersons is evident, in fact, in all of your own collections. How do all of these interests of yours nurture each other, and how do they reflect themselves in your work?
Well, I think that an artist or a designer or a writer, for that matter, really is a product of their total education. And that the greater the education, the stronger the stamp, and the depth of the work has a much stronger sincerity and clarity and intellect.
How important is research to your work?
It's a starting point, but basically my work is all a fantasy. And I think that most people need a starting point. They need a beginning, an inspiration. And that inspiration sometimes is much stronger, say, one year than the next year. And I think that's sometimes why one collection is better and another one isn't so good.
The clothes that you design are quite different from the kind of practical and I assume durable garments that you must have been accustomed to seeing as a child growing up on a Tennessee cotton farm.
My father was in the cotton business, and he also loved cattle and dogs and cats and pigs and silos and everything that goes with the farm.
After that early age, did you come to New York? And then eventually, as I recall, was a student of sociology at Columbia University.
Correct, and I even came down to the New School of Social Research for supplementary classes. Because
what did you study here?
Same thing, more sociology. And now I studied philosophy because they had at that time the so-called faculty in exile that had come from Europe. And there were some wonderful thinkers.
For you, the transition from the world of academia to the world of fashion actually was a swift one. I suspect it's not everyone who goes from a college student of sociology to becoming the international director of publicity for a celebrated fashion company. How did that come about?
One night I was invited by the head of Christian Dior to a cocktail party. And I heard that they were looking for a girl to run their public relations division in Christian Dior, New York. So I went up to the executive vice president and I said, listen, I'd like to interview for the job. I don't know anything about public relations, but if you hire me, I'll be a fast study and I'll learn the business within 2 months, and you don't have to pay me for the first 2 months. And if I do well, then I want to be paid. So he said, it's a deal. So at the end of 2 months, he said, you've done a fantastic job, and now you can be paid.
And how long did you stay there?
I stayed there 3 years, and it was a very interesting experience because when you're on the inside of a company like that, Christian Dior always said that his name would be remembered for his licensing empire. And so I learned about the building of a licensing empire, how you have to actually work it. At that time, they just licensed the name Christian Dior to the best manufacturer, say, for women's stockings, women's shoes, whatever. There was not the huge design input that designers give now to licensing.
You were involved in every aspect of, I assume, your licensing designs. I know how involved you were with the design of the bottle for your perfume, which resembles the very same pleats that we are wearing.
I know. It was a very interesting thing. We took a piece of fabric and we just twisted it like this. And I had a sculptor who came and worked with me on it. It took about a year to teach him how fabric actually flows in glass.
From the mid-1960s, 1964 I believe, to 1970, you lived in Africa. What circumstances brought you there?
Well, the first time I went there was on the invitation of Jane Engelhard, whose husband controls most of the uranium and platinum in the world. So I thought, well, that'll be great fun. I got into a plane to see what Africa was like.
Did you find it difficult to live there?
I loved my years in Africa. I became editor of Vogue South Africa, so that gave me a chance to see everything that happened in South Africa. I learned to write, and I learned to edit a magazine. I learned about merchandising, and I learned everything there was to know about South Africa from the political point of view, from the Afrikaans point of view. Well, I did leave South Africa and went to Zimbabwe, where I married my second husband, who was the director of the National Gallery there. And it was then called Rhodesia. And we developed then these workshop schools for the Africans.
Were you teaching artists to develop some skill or
Well, the Mashona were a very extraordinary tribe. They were carvers of stone since the 13th century. And it's like an inborn culture. That was in fact the beginnings of my inspiration when I did find that I was going to become a designer, because I had believed all this time that I would be a writer for the rest of my life, living in front of my typewriter. But I had never ever thought that I'd make a dress, for instance. It did happen in Africa, however, that I did have to make a couple of dresses because I couldn't find anything that I liked. I didn't know anything about sewing, so I made a square like this, and I cut out the head on one side, and I put a little hole at the end of this, in the middle of the square here. And then you'll notice the fabric falls in a bias. So it became a beautiful tunic, in fact, effect, and I used to put pants underneath it. But it was a very simplistic thing that anyone could do, and the fabric was, of course, extraordinary, because I'd find
Were those your first designs,
those
the
were
ones
the first
you're
designs,
describing?
yes. And so those were the designs when I came back to New York. They were photographed for the cover of Vogue.
When you came back to New York, you then went...
I became an editor.
Why don't you trace what happened from Madagascar to New York City?
I see, okay. The political situation closed in again in Zimbabwe. And it was pretty obvious at that point in 1969, 70, that the white people would have to leave very shortly or very quickly, and that South Africa would not come to their aid. And so since we've supported the black enterprises, we were not exactly persona grata. So my husband said to me, I think it's about time we leave. And so he decided to spend the rest of his life at sea, and I decided to seek my fortune in New York. Which I did. I came over to New York. I went over immediately to meet Alexander Lieberman, who's still, will probably always be, forever. One of my friends who I admire tremendously. And Diana Vreeland again came to my aid and said, Mary's in town, and why don't you give her a job in the art department? This time was after a month. Alex said to me, I think we better hire you. And then he realized that I was better in the journalistic area. So he made me special projects editor, which was in taking care of all the homes, home furnishings. I did the beauty pages, and I did all the photo reportage of personalities in their lifestyle. That lasted for 3 years. And then one day, my dress got on the cover of Vogue. Well, first of all, they said, once the dress is on the cover, go and get a merchandising credit. I just done a story on Geraldine Stutz. And,
is that Geraldine Stutz, who is the president of Bendel's? Is that
correct.
her practice, to see new work on Fridays?
Yes, Geraldine loved them, and she bought about 30 of each.
Where did you have 30 tunics?
I didn't have any. I had 3.
So what did you do?
So I said, listen, I don't know how to sew, and can you please help me out? I don't know anything about pattern making or grading or anything like that. And she suggested that I see a man called Mitsu, who was a Japanese, very highly qualified technician, because he's trained in Japan. And he said, I'll leave my business, he was in some pattern company, and we'll start making these clothes together. So he took a little basement in the East 85th Street, in the east side. It was so hot, no air conditioning, and we had a mirror over a sink and one seamstress. And I used to have to climb up onto the sink to see the proportion in this tiny mirror. Well, anyway, at any rate, this is in August. In September, we delivered the clothes on time. Geraldine then gave me a press show in store and invited the national press to the show, as well as some socialites. And through that show, I was able to book $1 million worth of business.
How influential has the fashion press been in terms of your own continuing success?
Any new star gets incredible press. And I was terribly lucky that I had 4-star collections for 3 or 4 years in a row.
And then what happened?
Then I went down to 1 star. I'm still sort of struggling around at 1 star. And maybe next year I'll do better. It took me 10 years to get the most highly sophisticated machine in terms of the best production manager, the best pattern makers, the best duplicate makers, and it's all in-house now.
You sound as if your life is in perfect shape. Enviable.
God, now I can become a playgirl practically.
Your involvement with American culture, however, goes beyond that, especially crafts.
Well, I met Patrick Lannon in 1973, and he's my business partner, and he owns a very large foundation. It's dedicated to young artists in Palm Beach, Florida. From 1975 to about 1977 is when we really bought heavily into all the glass artists internationally. I think our track record has been incredible in the discovery of new talent across the country in the areas of painting, sculpture,
Does this work
kinetics.
Involve your work as a designer too?
The only thing that I can see that goes into the collection that's related to what we do is that we have had used glass for jewelry, and we've worked with glass artists. We've worked with all kinds of unique young artists working in fiber development, because we're very heavily involved in that area.
When we talk about your showroom, which is filled with pieces from your own collection.
Mm-hmm. The showroom, which you see today, I think was really created about 5 years ago. And we painted it dark blue and filled it with the most extraordinary pieces of art. I mean, there's Alan Shields there, we have the jewelry exhibits on display there. There's a table by Marc de Souvreau. There's an installation done by Peter Gaufrain, who's an artist working in sales.
There are rugs and fabrics. In fact,
yes.
there are even 2 framed Mary McFaddens. They appear to be ready for the Costume Institute.
Well, one of them was a wedding dress, which has the most beautiful macrame work in it, and I wanted just to save it as something that hardly one will ever see again. And the other one is a hand-painted chiffon in an incredibly beautiful pastel configuration of abstracted flowers.
Your apartment is as spare and serene as a Buddhist temple.
Every 3 years I send a whole bunch of goods to auction. Then I notice I've got quite a lot of money in the bank again. Then I go out and
fill it up all over
again. That's what I did this afternoon.
Fashion, the inside story, will return in a moment. We now return to Fashion, the inside story.
Well, one of the things that you're not trapped in is any one location or any one style. You moved from a very large apartment that was rather formal in its nature to a glass enclosed box, and now you're going to the Italian Baroque period. Will that influence the design of your clothes as well?
We decided we're going to do a collection based on the Napoleonic period. We're dealing in a high neoclassical style. We're working with several fabric houses, of course, in Europe, where we can give them full-scale fabric design that they can print on beautiful base fabrics that we have chosen.
Is there a way that you can go about test marketing your ideas when your clothes and the ensemble is so unique?
Well, I've always believed that in staying very close to classical designs and shapes, and the closer I have stayed to them, the greater our sales have been.
So you've learned to be true to your own instincts. Your work has always relied heavily on an excellent color sense. How do you make decisions about color?
Well, for instance, let's think, the Olmec collection. The inspiration of the Olmec collection, the Olmec period is in fact the mother civilization of the pre-Columbian civilization. I went to Mexico and became fascinated with that period. And I think of Mexico as a rust land, a land of rusts and earth colors, and bright hot pinks, and a lot of brilliant sort of green. And that's how we came upon those colors.
How does that relate to your work at the Color Council, of which you are one of the fashion members?
We are all asked to submit across the spectrum of colors what we think the next color range will be for projections 1 year out. And usually what happens is that color seems to roll in a rather interesting cycle.
Can you give us a fearless forecast of new colors?
Well, right now I know what is very important, black and white. I can't tell you why I know it's important or why people are buying it. What I mean to say, that very graphic colors have been strong, like red and black or black and white. And I mean, you can see them in practically every collection.
What's the current price range of your clothes?
$500 to $3,000 at retail. And the average falls at $1,000.
Why do they cost so much? Is it the labor, the fabric?
Well, it's everything. The fabric, this fabric that we're both wearing, the Mari pleating, comes in, I think, at $14 pleated and landed. The labor that goes into the technique of making these dresses, it's very simple. It's actually very complicated, because if it isn't, the simplicity shows the perfection.
One of your favorite combinations is a long, loose tunic worn over floating loose pants or a long skirt. Is it because you think it's a permanent style, a classic?
I do. I think every woman can wear it. It disguises the mountains and valleys of a woman's figure. And I do feel that it elongates the woman. Maybe because I was small, I wanted to have this very columnar feeling, and I don't think the designer can ever separate their own body from their actual designs.
What does that really mean?
When I did go into design, I wanted to do all the things that I had hated about the other designers. And one of them was that, for instance, Balenciaga is certainly considered an architectural designer. I wanted the clothes to be fluid and to move with the body and not have their own architecture.
Are the clothes so distinctive that is there sometimes a problem with wearing the same outfit twice?
The hand-painted fabrics, the hand-painted over-tunics that were so extraordinary, really never sold because they were so obviously a strong design statement.
What is your own personal dress for success philosophy?
My grandfather always wore the same gray suit. It was there, and it was very elegant, and there was no decisions to be made. And I took that philosophy for a long time. Until recently, I started meeting a couple of movie stars. And I realized that they were making a terrific effort to be very attractive at all times. So I threw away my uniform, which had previously been black in the winter and white in the summer, and decided to make some fantastic daywear clothes. So this is my year of the peacock. So I have fantastic daywear clothes now.
And how do you manage to do it all? Where do you get the energy and the discipline?
Running a factory is like being a mother to 50 people. And every day there is a problem. And there's never a day that there is not a problem. And every day you have to talk to the people who are involved in, whether it be sales, production, the lawyers, the accountants, because you're there either physically or on the telephone, from 9 in the morning till 5 at night, dealing with various divisions or with the licensees, which we have many licensees in the market, many products in the market. I suppose if I lived in a sleepy town, I might sleep all day. But New York isn't like that. You feel the incredible momentum about it, and that's why I love it.
In addition to all of your designs for clothing and jewelry, you design home furnishings.
Well, we have a licensee with Martex for sheets and towels and bed coverings and comforters. And with Raintree Kirk Brummel, we have upholstery and wallpaper.
Does your interest in home furnishings stem from a desire for a more durable influence than fashion, which in a way is momentary? Or is it a commitment to, I guess, what could be called a more totally designed environment?
I really consider it an extension of fabric design, and that we're painting beautiful fabrics, and however they're used is up to the person who's going to buy them. But the most important thing to me is the beauty of the fabric.
In fact, I've read that you've said that we should surround ourselves with everything that is beautiful and pleasing to the senses. It's a nice idea, but how do we accomplish that in today's overly rushed and overly expensive world?
I think it requires a lot of research, a lot of imagination, a very careful allocation of time. The American woman is more individualistic now than she was in the 60s, where she was just said whatever the designer said, do this, do that, they did it like robots. I think now the woman of the 70s and going into the 80s and the 90s has a greater freedom, and she's started to understand herself at a younger age.
And how will it translate into what people will be wearing? Do you see more synthetic fabrics, more of a uniform dressing?
Well, there's no question that man-made fibers, whether they be polyester, rayon, or combinations of, are much more durable than natural fibers, and also much cheaper.
Did you ever dream your life would unfold the way it has?
I expect I was going to be a scholar about my whole life when I was young.
If you had it to do over again, what would you do otherwise?
I think God has really blessed me with an incredible, I think I was given an incredible gift.
How do you see that gift, Mary?
I couldn't speak when I was very young, for instance. I was totally inarticulate. I could maybe make one sentence at a time. And I had to work so hard just to learn how to speak, because I was so shy. In the beginnings, when I first started designing clothes, I think I was up every night, all night, sketching. I don't do that anymore. I mean, it's all natural. But I think the gift that God did give me is my sense of beauty, which is inside of me. And I can project that onto the various products we work with. And I can't describe what that is, but that's the gift that I think I was given.
The women who wear the clothes that Mary McFadden designs appear to be wearing works of art, and they are. For sharing with us your own distinctive insights and experiences, and doing it in such a generous way, our thanks to you, Mary McFadden.